Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Jules Appleton and I am Director of Research and Insights at First Book. I want to thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon to talk about building literacy-rich environments for your students. I'm sure we're all here today because we believe in the power of books, especially when it comes to young readers. So today we'll be discussing why classroom libraries are important, how you can build your own literacy-rich environment using the First Book Marketplace and our new classroom library checklist. And we'll hear from our special guest, early literacy expert Susan Neuman, as she chats with some current teachers about how they've built their own successful classroom libraries. We're really so excited to have you, and we hope you walk away from this webinar with concrete ideas on how to improve your own classroom libraries. So with that, I'm going to start by giving a quick overview of today's webinar. So here's a look at our agenda. We're going to start a bit by talking about First Book and the research behind our Building Literacy-Rich Environments work. Then Dr. Susan Neuman will join us to talk about her incredible work in this space and guide a discussion with a few fellow First Book educators who have been able to use the Literacy-Rich Classroom Library Checklist to help build their own libraries. Following that, we're going to give you a quick live demonstration of how you can easily shop the First Book Marketplace to find a variety of books to build your own libraries. And then finally, we'll end with questions. So if you have any questions throughout this webinar for either Dr. Neuman or for First Book, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end of the webinar. Also, just a few more housekeeping things. Just know that you can adjust your viewing experience for this webinar by using the widgets to control the size of the video or the slides or the chat boxes, however you see fit. During the panel discussion, the video pane will take up the size of the full screen, but you can keep using the Q&A widget to continue submitting questions throughout the webinar. So our hope is really that you walk away from this webinar today with 1, a better understanding of why access to books, specifically in schools and classrooms, is critical to children's development. 2, some tips and tricks from real educators on how you can add new books and furnishings to your own libraries on a budget. And 3, how you can use the Literacy-Rich Classroom Library Checklist to evaluate your own library and advocate for funding to bolster your classroom library. So with that, let's start by talking a bit about First Book and the research that led to the creation of this checklist. So First Book is a nonprofit social enterprise whose mission is to advance educational equity for children living in poverty. And we've aggregated the largest online community of educators serving children in need in the country. The First Book Network includes more than 550,000 formal and informal educators serving children ages 0 to 18 and grows by thousands each month. And these educators that we serve, they work in under-resourced classrooms and programs. They represent schools and public libraries, health clinics, literacy programs, food shelves, really any place that serves 70% or more kids in need. And these educators serving these under-resourced communities desperately need books. They need books and they need support resources and they need best practices for their classrooms and programs and books for their kids to take home. So First Book provides about 17 million books annually through the First Book Marketplace. And the First Book Marketplace is a nonprofit e-commerce site that provides high-quality books and resources at low or no cost to registered First Book members. I'm sure all of you here are very familiar with our First Book Marketplace and how you can use it to get books for your classrooms and programs. But in addition to providing books through our marketplace, First Book also has a research and insights arm. And this enables us to collect data from our network of educators on what their biggest challenges are in the classroom and what challenges their students are facing. And this all just helps us more directly address educator needs and the needs of the students they serve. We also use data from research and insights to inform what we call accelerator resources. These are timely and accessible, actionable support resources like the Literacy-Rich Classroom Library Checklist that we'll be talking about today, that are made available to educators that are registered with First Book to download for free through our marketplace. So, why did we conduct this research? Why are we having this conversation around building literacy-rich environments? There's a wealth of existing research that tells us that immersing children in book-oriented environments can improve educational outcomes. However, there's a severe lack of access to quality books and learning materials in low-income communities specifically, and it's one of the greatest contributors to educational inequality. Recent research on the subject has shown that 2.5 million children are enrolled in districts where there are no school libraries. In a 2015 study, they saw that only 15% of students with between 0 and 10 books in the home scored proficient in reading. That's compared to 50% of students who had more than 100 books in the home scoring proficient. And the percentage of children who say they read for fun on an almost daily basis has dropped significantly from nearly a decade ago. In fact, those numbers are at their lowest levels since the mid-1980s. So, given the lack of access to books in low-income areas, classroom libraries offer a critical opportunity to produce the literacy-rich environments that children need to thrive academically and in life, especially for those children living in under-resourced communities. And yet, there is no existing tool that educators and education leaders can use to guide and assess their classroom libraries to ensure that their libraries are robust enough to improve these educational outcomes. So, to better understand and be responsive to the needs of our educators, First Book, in partnership with Susan Neuman, conducted a literature review, field research, and a quantitative nationally representative survey of educators in low-income communities to learn more about the needs of educators when it comes to building their classroom libraries. And key findings from this survey, which was answered by over 1,200 First Book member educators, revealed that 54% of educators report having 10 or fewer books per child in their classroom. 47% said it took more than 6 years to build their classroom library. We also learned that educators estimate that 40% of their book selections represent diverse cultures, but most educators don't consider this to be diverse enough. They want more diversity in their classroom libraries. We learned that 96% of educators report using their own personal money to fund books in their classroom library. And on average, educators are spending $346 of their own money per year to fund books and materials for their classrooms. And lastly, we learned that 77% of educators reported paying for the furnishings in their reading area with their own money. So it's clear that educators are deeply devoted to building quality classroom libraries and spend years and many of their own personal dollars to do so. And First Book really wanted to make it easier for educators to know how to spend their limited budget and limited time to build the best classroom library they can. So how did we use this research? The survey really enabled educators to evaluate their current classroom libraries by testing a prototype of the literacy-rich classroom library checklist and giving us feedback on it. Through this process, we were able to adjust the checklist to reflect the feedback of our educators so that we could ensure it was accessible and effective for all educators. The survey also gave us some great insights into educators' needs and a better understanding of the lack of access to high-quality books that educators and children are facing. So, using this feedback, we created an educator toolkit called the Literacy Rich Classroom Library Checklist, an assessment tool for equity. With this toolkit, educators can use the checklist to assess the design, contents, and functionality of their classroom library and get guidance on how to advocate for additional resources. The toolkit includes tips from educators to learn about practical and creative ways to build or enhance your classroom library, and these are tips that were crowdsourced directly from educators in the First Book Network, just like you. It also offers resources and funding ideas to learn how to use this checklist as an advocacy tool to advocate for more funding to bolster your classroom library and where you can go for additional support resources. So, with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Neuman to tell you a bit more about her extensive research on literacy-rich environments and the dire need for better access to quality books for children in low-income communities. And then after that, we will bring in our guest educators. So, Susan, I pass it to you.
Great. Well, great. Thank you so much. Jules, this is a topic that's very important and very passionate to me, especially. Many years ago, what I did is I began to ask the critical question, Why are so many children struggling in reading? And why are so many children not enjoying the reading act? And what I began to do is I looked around communities. My first focus was in Philadelphia, but then I went to other communities across the country. And what I began to recognize is that many of our communities really have very, very limited access to print. In fact, we would call them book deserts. And what that means is that if a parent would want to read to a child, they would have to have a hard time to find actually a book. In the last study we did, I think it was 2019, we actually found that 832 children would have to share one book, and the only book we found was a Spanish dictionary. So in other words, there is no equal access for so many of our children who want to read and would be interested in reading, yet lack access to print. And so we began to say, how can we build a community that really supports early literacy development and literacy at large development? And we began to look at not just the community, but the school and the school context. And we found that in many of our schools, the library no longer exists. The school library is a locked closet. Some of the books are before my time. So we began to realize that what we really need to see were classroom libraries, libraries where children could literally stretch their hands and find a book right at their hands. And that would be incredibly important for a child to begin to say, oh, life is natural to have a book. But as you mentioned, many of our books are too expensive for parents and teachers even to purchase. Some of them are $12 and $15 per book, and most teachers simply cannot afford, or their school cannot afford, that level of funding. And so we find that schools are underfunded, and that really is problematic. And when we began to study classroom libraries and saw the power that classroom libraries had, we realized that a good classroom library has certain components that we think are very important and that actually draw children to want to read. One of them is attractive environment, something that is attractive and orderly. It is not just sort of a shelf with books lined up vertically. What the children need to see is they need to see those books, because those books for very young children can almost look like toys. They're engaging, they're exciting. Children need to see a fair number of books because the choice is so critically important for their development. In other words, when they choose, I want to read this book versus another book, they begin to develop their own reading habits, their own reading interests. And what you'll find as a classroom teacher, and I know many of you will say this, is that sometimes the books are not at their level. I know that. They may be real easy, they may be too hard, but that's okay, because what children are doing is they're learning to calibrate what is interesting to them, what is appropriate for them, what drives their motivation to read. And that really creates a lifelong reader. So the choice is critically important. And the other thing that, of course, is so important is diversity. And what we know is that children need to see themselves, they need to see others who are not like themselves, and they need to experience the world both inside and outside their environment. And so diversity really matters for everybody, for all children, no matter where they are. And so when we put these things together, what we decide to do is create a tool that could help teachers really identify what is a good classroom library, what do I want to see, and how can I begin to talk to others about what are my needs? In other words, what is my library rich in books, and what are things that I might need to supplement or to encourage children to actually use the library. And then finally, and I'm looking forward to hearing our speakers talk about this today, it's not only important to have a classroom library, but you have to have time that give children the opportunity to use that library. A beautiful library without children in it is not really a great classroom library. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to our panel, and I'd love to hear how you have used a checklist and what you are doing to really embellish not only the classroom library, but actually the classroom library's use to motivate children to read. And here's our wonderful panel, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about yourself, where you work, what you do, and let's start with Heather.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather McCarthy. I work at Oaklawn Hometown Middle School in Oaklawn, Illinois, which is a south suburb of Chicago. This is my second year as the librarian here, and previous to that, I spent 19 years teaching 7th grade English language arts.
Great. And Carrie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Nunez. I am a teacher in New York City. I currently teach in Brooklyn in the neighborhood of Canarsie, and I am currently in 2nd grade. I've been teaching for 10 years now.
Wow, wonderful. Michaela, how about you?
Hi, my name is Michaela Morris. I teach high school English here in Fresno, California, which is right in the middle, kind of between San Francisco and LA. I've taught all grades in the past seven years, but I have all juniors this year.
Wonderful. And Rachel? Rachel, we need to hear you.
I don't know. Do they have me muted? Can you hear me?
Oh, no, I can hear you now.
Okay. My name is Rachel Schultz. I am an elementary librarian. I teach K through 5. I teach about an hour outside of Philadelphia in a suburban school district. I've been in my current district for 8 years, but I have been a librarian from kindergarten through 12th grade for 15 years now.
Well, I'm delighted to meet all of you. I think this is going to be a great panel because I really want to hear about some of your successes as well as some of your challenges. So Heather, why don't we start with you? Tell us about your greatest success. What really motivated you in your classroom library?
I would say our greatest success right now is we added a picture book section and a self-help and wellness section to our library. And a lot of people think picture books are for K-5 and we're 6, 7, 8, but our kids just devour these picture books. It's been great for student engagement, like an entry point into research, and great for read alouds too. And then with such an emphasis on social emotional learning, our kids are really diving into our self-help and wellness section. We have books on self-control, mindfulness, individuality, identity, and perseverance. And adding those two sections into the library has really been a great success for the students.
That's a great idea because we know so many of our children really need opportunities to express themselves and to see themselves, and social emotional activity is really important, especially after this pandemic. So that's a great set of suggestions. How about you, Carrie?
So as a 2nd grade teacher, one of the biggest successes in my classroom has actually been creating a library based on students' reading levels, but also having a library that has a lot of authors that we like in 2nd grade that the children enjoy reading, as well as books that are of their interest. But one of the things that I am most proud of, which you kind of mentioned and touched about, was including books that the students feel that are part of them, of their culture, those culturally responsive books that they can see themselves reflected in, books about things that they experience on a daily basis, that they can make those connections, books that they want to pick, even if they're not able to read it because it might not be on their reading level, but because they see things from their own culture, or maybe a different language they speak at home, that they're taking those books because they want to read it. They're able to make those personal connections with them.
Well, Carrie, I think that's so important because sometimes we overemphasize the issue of level. And one of the things we want to do in a classroom library is allow children to just have a fun with a book that may be not their level at all. You know what I mean? It's just great fun. And then we also want children to challenge themselves because that's how you become a better reader, right? So I really love those suggestions. Michaela, tell me about some of your greatest challenges. I mean, I'm sure we all have them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what the research reflects too is a huge challenge for me has been funding to get the books for my classroom. It's also a huge challenge to convince the people who have the money that it's worth spending on classroom libraries, that it's just as valuable of a purchase as our district-wide curriculum would be. And sometimes administrators think, well, excuse me, I'm in my classroom right now. There's the bells.
Well, reality.
And sometimes, yeah, a little reality. Yeah. So it's sometimes hard to convince administrators that, they think we have this amazing library across campus. Can't you just take your students there to check out books? And that's an of course we can answer, but it's also, as you said, having the books in their fingertips and making them really attractive and accessible for them. So I think that's been a challenge, just to get everybody on board so that the funding that we do have on campus can actually be spent on our classroom libraries.
Right. That's such an important point. And I hope you can give us more evidence later or more advice on how you convey that message so that our administrators really begin to get it. Rachel, how about you? Challenges?
Well, I agree that budget is always a big thing. Now, coming from a librarian's perspective, of course, we get a budget. It's been cut severely because of everything going on post-COVID. So very thankful for opportunities that First Book gives, looking for donations, and different opportunities that like PTOs can provide. But my husband works in the same district as me, actually in the same building. And so I see firsthand what classroom teachers go through as well. And, I try to team up with my teachers and help them as well because, coming from a home where there's two of us and trying to help a classroom teacher build a library as well, it's something that I see. It's not just affecting me in my library, but a classroom teacher. And I know the importance of having classroom libraries. So I always try to help my classroom teachers when it comes to like having my book fair. They help when it comes to having a book fair. So we split out those funds. And when it comes to First Book, we get opportunities where we get funding and, book sets, try and help them build their libraries. And, the checklist really helps classroom teachers see the importance of having the multicultural books and the different books on different disabilities. So it's really important.
Well, it sounds that way, doesn't it? So Heather, what is most important to you when building your library?
The most important thing to me and my students is diversity and representation. And really diversity in all sense of the word, diversity as far as various cultures being represented, a multicultural society being represented, but then also diversity as far as the format of books and the different types of genres that are represented within the library. And then, of course, representation, which goes hand in hand with the diversity, that I want my students to be able to see themselves in the books and then also to be able to see others. So we really focus on, like Rudine Sim Bishops and mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors and making sure that everybody is represented.
Could you tell people what mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors mean? Just expound a little bit on that.
Just that, so the idea of a mirror, that when you look in a mirror and you see yourself, and so when you're looking in a book, you would also want to see yourself. You would want to be able to connect with that character. This goes back to our picture book selection also that we're so proud of, because the students can actually really see themselves in the books when the pictures and the illustrations match how they look, and seeing characters that represent them. But then also those windows of looking out into the world and looking through the window and meeting other people through the books, through the text, and then eventually pretty much entering into their world and immersing yourself into various cultures and different forms of society so that you get a holistic approach. Because it's great to see yourself in a book, in a mirror, and then it's also great to learn about others. Kind of develop that sense of empathy through texts.
What a beautiful way of saying that. Yeah, thank you. Rachel, how about you? What is most important to you when you're building your library?
For me, it is, again, because being with my whole population, it's definitely about what my students are going to read and seeing themselves, not just culturally, but ability-wise. I'm in a building with many different special education students, and sometimes that is difficult, finding students in wheelchairs or using walking sticks in a book. Right. Luckily, in the last couple years, that representation has stepped up a little more. So that's something I definitely always look for.
One of the things, let me ask you this as a librarian, Rachel, do you encourage teachers to change their book selection over time so that it keeps the library fresh?
I definitely try.
Okay.
When I came into my current building, there was definitely an older building of people who have been here for a very long time. And, sometimes people get a little set in their ways. We're used to doing things the same way year after year after year. And, our turnover of students is changing. And so we need to represent that in the books that we're reading and the lessons that we're doing. And so I'm a big advocate for that, and trying to show that in the books that we even just had in our library was very, very important for me, because the faces that we're looking back were not very representative of the students that we had in our building. So in the 8 years that I've been here, I definitely made sure that was something that I worked to change. And I'm proud of the teachers that we have here, because that is definitely something that I've seen us working on and changing.
Yeah, good point. So, I work with younger kids, and what we find is when we refresh our classroom library and put in new books that are that they haven't seen before, wow, their eyes just beam. It's almost like toys, because it's something new. And I think sometimes what we need to do is keep some of our wonderful books away for a little bit and then bring them back, because it becomes so exciting to the children all over again. So Carrie, what's important to you in terms of your building your library?
So definitely considering a variety of books, as we've all been mentioning, books that the kids want to read, books on different series. In second grade, throughout my years of teaching, I've been on second grade now for 8 years. The kids have these favorite series. And like you said, once I put in a new book from that series, they all want to put their hands on it. So I need to have a couple of copies of that series. One of them is, for example, Pinky and Rex. The author has published like 8 different copies of different stories in the series, and they all want to read it, and they all are trying to get their hands on it. So we kind of share it. I try to have 2 and 3 copies of the same book so that they all have an opportunity. Once one child's done reading it, they pass it off to another classmate. So there's different variety of the choices that they're making. It can even be, I have students that love books on sports. So having a selection of different sports, of different athletes that they might want to read about. So it could be anything from the games that they maybe like to play. I have second graders that love playing Minecraft. So if they see a book about Minecraft in our classroom library, they're definitely going to go and pick that, even if they're not able to read it. But it's a book that they're going to try to read, look through the pictures or the illustrations, even if they're not able to read it on their own.
So that's so cool. I want to emphasize one of the things that you just said, and that is having multiple copies of a favorite book like that. What you'll find is the children actually sit next to each other and read together. It becomes a social act. And that's really important. So teachers want to think about what are those super, like Minecraft, whatever, that really draw children in, and they might want to read as a gang or a group together. So that's terrific. Well, I'd love to hear, Michaela, I'd love to hear some advice. Give us advice on what you would suggest to other educators on how to build their library.
Sure. So I think all of what the panelists have mentioned for a classroom library is so important. The diversity of text. As I hear you sharing about the picture books in the library, it made me excited too. I teach juniors in high school, and even having some picture books in my classroom library, it just thrills them and it reminds them of nostalgia and things that they really felt joy with when they were younger. Because a lot of times by the time I get kids, they aren't as excited about reading as they once were. And so reminding them that reading can be joyful and social is so important. And so building in that variety of text, I think, is the number one goal. But also to just, my advice to teachers would be just to go for it. I've really had to tell that to other colleagues on campus who are a little nervous that we don't have the funding or kids won't use the books, to just be the person on your campus who makes the decision to try. I shared my challenges and struggles with budget and getting the budget, but once I piecemealed together some books and started having a more attractive area and having time set aside for kids to get the books, that culture of reading is really contagious. My administrators are asking me, why are your kids reading in math class when normally they're on their cell phones or something? And so having the books that are exciting and new and related to their lives, kids do want to read if you give them the books that they want to read. And so just giving the advice of teachers to go for it. And on a budget, doing that in really creative ways, using sites like First Book and Scholastic have been hugely helpful for me. Working with other librarians and teachers to build the collection over time, I've received really great cast-offs from my librarian. Maybe they bought 4 copies when it was a top book, but they don't need those 4 anymore. And so they get divided to classroom libraries. I've also worked with teachers in my department to create kind of a rotating collection to, like you said, hold some of the best books back. They're not in our cupboards. They just go to a different classroom. And so every couple months, we'll box up a set from our rooms and move them to the next room so that other teachers can have access to them. And then lastly, I think just my advice to teachers is to not be afraid to accept donations from the community and to ask for those. I've gotten really great books from parents, who are avid readers and they want to give away some of their text. I've also gotten great donations from our local CSU, University, Fresno State. Some professors there have been really generous with their resources too. So just being the squeaky wheel on your campus, that these libraries are important, and being squeaky in the community too, telling people that you are in need. You can't receive if you don't ask. So that would be my biggest advice.
Wonderful advice. Lots of good tips. And one of the things we want to be careful of is to make sure that those books are in good condition. So all those people who are listening who want to maybe help us and donate, be sure that those books are really in good condition, because the children will love them if they are, not love them so much if they are not. Heather, do you have any additional tips that you'd love to convey?
Well, I was just thinking as I was listening to Michaela, I love how she said, "Why are they reading in your math class?" And this is where the checklist has really come in handy for me as the librarian. I have used it for advocating for my students with administration on more books, 10 to 20 books per kid, and more books on just reading for fun and being engaged. It doesn't have to always relate back to the content. But I've shared the checklist with not only the language arts teachers, but the math teachers and the science and social studies, because we're all teachers of reading. And so sometimes the math teachers don't realize you can have a classroom library also. And they don't have to all be math books. We can have books of all different types. So if anybody who's listening can build their own classroom library with the checklist, but then also pass it on to the math teacher or science, social studies, all the different content areas, because everybody should build a classroom library and everybody should be promoting reading to their students.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, but it seems like that checklist has really provided an opportunity for you to say, this is what I have, this is what I need, help me community, help me administrator. Let me build something that is really powerful for children. So let me ask you in these last few minutes, how are you using your classroom library? Carrie, would you like to start? How are you using it? Do children have an independent reading time? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, they do. In second grade, they have that independent reading time. When they're done with their independent work, they're encouraged to read. They all have their own baggies. They all get a chance to go book shopping, and we kind of try to make it exciting. And one of the things that I've been working so hard on doing is also increasing the number of books in my library. So year after year, I'm trying to add more books. And First Book Marketplace has been an amazing resource in order to do that. I try to take advantage as much as I can of the different codes that sometimes I'm emailed. Sometimes we get those emails where there's a discount rate for a selection of books. So I'm always trying to add more books to the library so that the students are encouraged to read, that I'm building a love for reading from the early grades so that as they move on through their school years, it's something that they're going to love. It's something that they're going to take with them. I don't want it to be something that they feel like we are pushing on them, but that it builds and that it grows as they leave second grade.
Oh, wonderful. And Rachel, how are teachers using the classroom library? Give us examples from your place.
Well, we follow the Lucy Calkins program, so every classroom must have a classroom library in place, which it's a pretty big literacy program that's followed. So every day they have free reading built into their schedule, it's nice. It is nice that they get that opportunity. Using this guide, it's something that will give some of our new teachers a good place to start when it comes to trying to build a library, because it's not necessarily something you're taught when it comes to school. Is where do I start? And teachers don't really get a baseline of a library to start with. They might have 25 books or maybe a couple books left behind if they're replacing a teacher. So a lot of times they're left kind of like, okay, where am I going to start? And this checklist is a great place now for me to be able to give them.
Great. Michaela, how are teachers using, or how are you using your classroom library? Do you have independent reading time?
Yeah, that was something that was really important to me when I first started teaching and has kind of caught on around campus, is time dedicated for student choice reading. And so the classroom libraries are super important for that. And that's really what sustains the love of reading, because I can pick a class novel, but it's not going to appeal to every student. And so having the dedicated time where they get to pick and time to help them pick their books is really important. And so the checklist has been helpful in like reminding me that I need to have the number of books and high quality books for kids available for them. But it's also helpful that the dedicated class time is on there too, because it validates what we're doing when administrators ask if that is a good use of our class time. It's nice to be able to have the backup and say that it is.
And Heather, we're running out of time, but I wanted to give you the last word. How are people using classroom libraries in your place?
We're all trying to build classroom libraries, and it, of course, like everyone else, funding is always difficult. The checklist is really helpful with the data that's in there, because people love to go to the data when you're trying to get money, as long as you have the numbers to prove it. And that's what we're using the checklist for most, is looking at the research that's already built into it, besides all the tips and tricks. And so that is really helpful with getting the funding to get the books into the classroom. And then, yes, we try to give our students as much independent, self-selected reading time as we can fit in.
That's wonderful. So unfortunately, we've run out of time, but you've been a great panel. And I love some of the tips that you provided to teachers. And I'm sure some of them will have additional ideas in the chat. So I'd love to turn it back to, or I think I'll turn it back to Jules or Lori to continue. And again, thank you all so much for contributing. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Susan, and thank you to our panel for that really wonderful discussion. Really appreciate all your guys' work and all your insights on this topic. So our last section of the webinar before we move into Q&A will just be a quick live walkthrough of how you can use the First Book Marketplace to successfully and efficiently shop for the books that you need to build your library. So my colleague Lori will share her screen and she'll demonstrate how you can shop to find titles that represent diverse characters and cultures that celebrate inclusivity, how you can use filters for refining as you browse and search the First Book Marketplace, and how you can locate helpful information for each book as you're shopping. So now I will pass it to Lori Prince, our Senior Director of Merchandising at First Book.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lori, and it's really exciting to meet all of you today. I am going to pop my screen up here for a minute, and we're going to do a bit of a highlight reel of the marketplace. And as Jules said, find some fun tips and tricks. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. Okay. So thank you so much for joining me on this tour. I hope that this helps as you continue to evaluate, update, and grow your collections. So first, actually, let's take a quick look at the homepage. Just like most online shopping stores, you're going to find a search, place to log in, your cart, and the main navigation. Below that, at the top of the page here, are going to be sort of the most exciting and relevant pieces of information. Not so exciting, but definitely relevant. Shipping timeline information, because holidays are coming up. Also, it's the end of the year, so it is Best New Books of the Year time. Always so much fun to talk about what our favorites were that were published this year. This is a great place to go jump in and see what's new and awesome to add to your libraries. And right under that, everyone, please take a moment to jot down this super awesome promo code that's live right now, CHEER35, thanks to our friends at KPMG Family for Literacy. You can get 35% off your whole order on the marketplace. So make sure you write that down. Scrolling on down, we've got some other relevant things. We've got the holiday shop here, our newest arrivals, so stuff that's just come in on the marketplace. It's the holidays, so we're also talking about family traditions and celebrations, seeing what families do together. Fun way to shop by age, everyone's favorite $3 and under while you're stretching your budget, our featured free resource right now, a little bit about First Book, and all the way at the bottom, some fine print about that wonderful promo code. Jumping right back up to the top, I want to talk about filters because we're going to be using them as we browse the marketplace today. So up here at our newest arrivals, we're going to pop in to see everything. And then over here on the side, we have our shopping options, our filters. Again, just like any other store you're going to shop on. New arrivals is one of those nice, big, broad categories where you've got all types of books in it. So age groups is a really great way to filter so you can get those just right books for your kids. Underneath that, we've got price. Book type is something that I'm super passionate about, and I find this to be a really great tool for filtering so that if you're looking for books sort of focusing on a certain reading ability, so looking at things like beginning readers versus chapter books, where chapter books are getting into a little bit more fluency and comprehension, versus then middle grade or YA novels. So using those filters are really great, or jumping in to see all of our picture books, all of our graphic novels and comics, got nonfiction as well in here. Down here under type, this is really looking at the format of the books. So you're looking for board books, hardcover books, paperback books, language, and then product quantity is something where here, the new arrivals section, what we've got are books that are available singly, but there are other categories throughout the marketplace where you can shop collections or cartons of titles. So that's going to be a great filter to use in other areas. So that is our new arrivals section. But now we're going to go to my favorite page on the marketplace. So you hover over the books button here in the nav. This first one is our diversity and inclusion page. And this page is full of amazing, amazing resources. So as we scroll down, you'll see every month we change out these features. So these are timely topics that we want to make sure folks can find really easily. And below that is the opportunity to shop by category under the umbrella of diversity and inclusion. This is a great option for you as you diversify your collection. As you're looking for those mirrors and windows, we have different categories where we've broken up our books in these into these buckets so that you can find just the right books for your kiddos. So you can click into these different kinds of categories, or if you want to, you can go and you can actually see everything. And then you can filter here by those subcategories if you want to start at sort of the broadest point. And for some of our categories under diversity and inclusion, we also have a couple of other additional categories that I really recommend you check out. So in this case here with Black characters and cultures, we also have a category here called Black authors and illustrators. So this is going to be books written specifically by Black authors, Black illustrators. And so this is a great way to find what, if you've heard the term before, own voices books. So folks who are writing within their experience. And it's a really, really great selection of books to check out. You can also jump from here to our Coretta Scott King Award winners. So these are fantastic books, all recognized by the American Library Association in the Coretta Scott King Awards from past years, from just this past year. Awards are coming up at the beginning of next year. We're really excited to see what wins. So as you're browsing around this site, I really recommend taking a look at the copy that's up the top of the sections, because often we'll have links to other relevant categories. Okay. Jumping back to diversity and inclusion page, we're going to scroll down and I want to take you to a couple of other places. I want to highlight our Spanish and Spanish English bilingual books. Really, really great option if you have Spanish speakers in your community. And then also all the way down the bottom, I want to give a shout out to our diversity and inclusion calendar. This is our calendar for 2022-2023. and it is full of awesome observations, religious holidays, special dates, including also some activities and then links to relevant sections on the marketplace. So as you're looking at, the rest of your school year, downloading this calendar is really going to help you make sure that you're really digging into all different kinds of occasions each month. So we're going to scroll back up. So next, I'd like to take you to a page that's a really great jumping off point when you come to the marketplace. So back in the nav, this time we're actually going to click on this books button. Boop. And here, this is our recommended right now page. So this is sort of what's hot, what's trending, what's on our minds. So the first thing you'll always find in this green block are our first book favorites. And these are staff picks on timely and often really fun topics. So right now, obviously, books that make great gifts is what's on everybody's mind. But we also do things like our favorite funny books or our favorite feel-good books or books that make us want to go outside and run around. So this is one that changes every month. So I really recommend you come check it out. In addition, we have 3 other categories that we feature each month. Again, topics that are on our minds, including sections that we recommend you shop now for next month. So with MLK Day coming up in January, it's a great time to check out our Inspiring Activists section. We also have a fabulous selection of what's really the most popular categories on the marketplace, including new arrivals, $3 and under, award winners, and everybody's favorite graphic novels and comics. So all the way back at the top, last thing I'd love to do is highlight a few additional ways to shop and explore. Back at our books button, we have the option to shop by genres. So again, thinking about making sure you've got books that are really going to appeal to different kinds of readers, especially as you get into those older areas where kids become like sci-fi kids, or they're really into action books, funny books, or they're like super into facts. This is a really great place to start. And also, again, we actually have book types as categories as well. So you can use them as filters in other categories, but you can also jump in and see everything that we have in a certain book type all at once. And shout out to Heather and Michaela for talking about using picture books with older readers. It's one of my favorite things. And so jumping into our picture book section, you can then filter by age groups. And we do have books that we do recommend for older readers as well. And that is it. Oh, one other thing I wanted to show you all is just that we've got some additional information on product pages. So as you're on your product page, we've got a little description here. You can see your product type and your age groups right away, right up here at the top. And then we also have some more information. So if you're looking for the ISBN, if you're looking for the Lexile, if we've got reading levels on the books, if they were made available, then this is where you're going to find them. And that is it. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking a little whirlwind trip through the marketplace with me. Jules, I'm going to pass it back to you, I think.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Lori. So that wraps up the bulk of our program today, but we're going to move to a Q&A and just answer some of the questions that came in as we were chatting today. So I'm going to start with a really great question that's actually targeted at First Book, but I really want to hear your thoughts, Susan, on it. So the question is, does First Book want us to prioritize getting quality books into the classroom or distribute them into the homes of students? So I think this is a great question, and I'm going to give my quick 2 cents. Honestly, in an ideal world, the answer is both. You would be able to prioritize both. And I know the majority of educators in the First Book Network do an equal amount of sending books into the homes and keeping them in the classroom. First Book is really only able to reach educators. We're not able to reach directly into the home, but we can rely on you guys to help us do that. So I think both are important. I would love to hear your thoughts, Susan, on books in the classroom versus books in the home.
Well, sometimes books in the home get to be wallpaper. Do you know what I mean? They're here, they're loving friends, but we don't necessarily return to them again and again. So if I were to prioritize, I would say put those books in the classroom library because number one, it's really important in terms of social interaction, getting kids to talk and engage with others over books is just terrific. And it also has more variety and choice. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, next question. This one I think would be great for you to answer, Susan. When building a classroom library, would you say quantity is more valuable than quality, or a mixture of both, or what would you say?
Well, of course, I would love to have a mixture of both. There's nothing more wonderful than seeing a rich library where children have approximately 10 books to choose from. But if I had only one thing that I could do, I would say quality really matters. That when they see those gorgeous books and they're on topics that are compelling to children, they act like toys. And that's really important because children learn that books are something that can be a friend. They learn that it's fun to read. They learn to become motivated to read. And so I think that quality issue is really, really important.
That's great. So next question, what books are most likely to draw children's interest and help motivate them to read? I think I can give a quick answer to this. So really, books are really at their most effective and engaging, and we've talked about this throughout this webinar, when they act as windows into the diverse world, as well as mirrors that provide an affirmation of the reader. So this diverse content, these diverse characters are very important, which we've talked about at length through this webinar. But other things to consider are when looking for engaging books is I would say books that are part of a series that students can really immerse themselves in and get to know the characters from beginning to end of the series. Books with familiar characters always help. And really the main thing, just make sure you have a variety of genres and reading levels represented in your collection so that any student can enter the library and no matter their interest, no matter their reading level, there's a book there for them that will grip them. And the last thing I'd say is that free choice. Is the more free choice you can give students, the more they're going to love the book they choose.
Right. I'd like to put in a personal plug for information books. I think that traditionally, many libraries have storybooks, and they're wonderful. I mean, you've just described them and how important they are, Jules. But a lot of our students are not inclined to read unless they feel like they're learning about something. In other words, they really love sports and they want to know everything they can about sports. And I think that having books that provide information are very important for students who want to see that books have a purpose. It's not just about joy. It's about learning and learning content knowledge. So I want to make a personal plug to have a percentage of books that are just about information.
Yeah, that's great. So that Q&A went a lot faster than I expected to. We're actually almost at time. So the last thing I just want to say, I want to make sure everyone knows where they can go to find the checklist and to read more about this research. So the Literacy Rich Classroom Checklist can be found at firstbook.org. You'll see it right there at the front page. You can download it for free. You'll also find there the toolkit for educators to help them build their classroom libraries. And you can also read the complete report to this research and take a look at all the findings that we discovered from all this research. The resource is free to all educators, and hopefully that you will share the news wide. And really, I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. Susan, it was so lovely to have you. That panel was, I want to thank our panel again. This was really incredible discussion, and I hope people learned something today and found it very helpful. So thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Jules. It was great. Take care.
Have a great night, everyone.